the shadow of Blackthorn Hollow. Deep in the heart of an ancient forest, shrouded by mist and whispered legends, lay Blackthorn Hollow, a place where few dared to tread. It was said that the hollow held secrets buried deeper than its roots, treasures guarded by curses older than time itself. For years, adventurers had ventured into its depths, only to vanish without a trace. But not everyone feared it. Evelyn Kane adjusted her backpack as she stood at the edge of the hollow, her breath visible in the cold autumn air. A seasoned explorer with more scars than stories, Evelyn had spent her life chasing mysteries others deemed too dangerous. This time, however, she wasn't alone. Her partner, Marcus Reed, leaned against a tree nearby, his sharp eyes scanning their surroundings. He was younger than Evelyn, but equally skilled, though his motives were less about adventure and more about survival. Together, they formed an unlikely duo, Evelyn driven by curiosity, Marcus by desperation. "We're being watched," Marcus muttered, fingering the hilt of his knife. "Of course we are," Evelyn replied coolly. "This is Blackthorn Hollow. If no one's watching you here, you're probably already dead." They pressed on, following a map scrawled on brittle parchment. The map promised riches beyond imagination, but also warned of peril. According to legend, the treasure was hidden beneath an old stone altar, deep within the hollow. But there was a catch. Anyone who sought the treasure would have to face the Guardian, a spectral figure rumored to protect the prize with lethal force. As dusk fell, the forest grew darker, the trees twisting unnaturally overhead like skeletal fingers. They set up camp near a stream, lighting a small fire despite the risk of attracting attention. Neither spoke much. Both knew what lay ahead. It wasn't long before the first scream shattered the silence. Evelyn bolted upright, grabbing her machete. Marcus was already on his feet, his knife drawn. The sound had come from somewhere close, too close for comfort. Without hesitation, they followed the noise, weaving through dense underbrush until they stumbled upon a gruesome sight. A man lay sprawled on the ground, his body contorted unnaturally. His wide, unseeing eyes stared up at the canopy above, and a jagged wound marred his chest. Blood pooled around him, dark and sticky against the earth. "Who?" Marcus began, but Evelyn silenced him with a raised hand. She knelt beside the corpse, examining the scene. There were no tracks leading away, no signs of struggle save for the blood-soaked leaves beneath them. Whoever, or whatever, had killed this man had done so swiftly and silently. "This isn't natural," Evelyn murmured. "Look at the wound. It's almost surgical." Marcus swallowed hard. "Do you think it's the Guardian?" Before Evelyn could answer, another voice called out from behind them. "You shouldn't be here." They spun around to see a woman stepping out of the shadows. She wore tattered clothes and carried a crossbow slung over her shoulder. Her piercing green eyes glinted with suspicion. "Who are you?" Evelyn demanded. "Lila Crane," the woman replied. "And I'm guessing you two are after the same thing I am." Evelyn exchanged a glance with Marcus. Trusting strangers in Blackthorn Hollow was a surefire way to get yourself killed. But something about Lila seemed genuine. "What happened to him?" Marcus asked, nodding toward the dead man. Lila hesitated before answering. "He was part of my group. We came here looking for the treasure, just like you. Last night, something attacked us. Whatever it is, it doesn't want us finding the altar." Evelyn frowned. "How many were in your group?" "4," Lila said grimly. "Now it's just me." The trio decided to join forces, reasoning that strength in numbers might improve their chances of survival. As they journeyed deeper into the hollow, the atmosphere grew heavier, the air thick with an unnatural chill. Strange symbols carved into the trees seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight, pulsating with an eerie energy. By dawn, they reached the clearing where the stone altar stood. It was massive, covered in moss and etched with runes that shimmered like liquid gold. At its center rested a small, ornate box, the treasure they'd been searching for. But standing between them and the prize was a figure cloaked in darkness. Its form shifted constantly, neither fully human nor beast. Glowing red eyes locked onto them, radiating malice. "The Guardian," Evelyn whispered. Without warning, the creature lunged. Chaos erupted as the three fought desperately to survive. Lila fired bolts from her crossbow, each striking true but doing little to slow the beast. Marcus slashed wildly with his knife, while Evelyn swung her machete with practiced precision. Just when it seemed they might prevail, the Guardian let out a deafening roar and disappeared in a swirl of shadows. Silence fell once more. Breathing heavily, Evelyn approached the altar and opened the box. Inside was a single gemstone, glowing with an otherworldly light. But as she reached for it, Lila suddenly grabbed her wrist. "I'm sorry," Lila said, her voice trembling. "I need this more than you do." Before Evelyn could react, Lila plunged a dagger into her side. Evelyn gasped, collapsing to her knees as blood seeped through her shirt. "Lila!" Marcus shouted, horrified. "She knew too much," Lila snapped, snatching the gemstone. "You should have stayed out of this, Evelyn." With that, Lila fled into the woods, leaving Evelyn bleeding and Marcus torn between vengeance and survival. In the end, Marcus chose to stay with Evelyn, using his knowledge of first aid to patch her up as best he could. Though weakened, Evelyn vowed to hunt Lila down, not for the treasure, but for justice. Blackthorn Hollow had claimed another victim, but its secrets remained buried. And somewhere in the shadows, the Guardian waited for the next foolhardy soul to enter its domain. The hunt for Lila Crane. Evelyn's recovery was slow and painful, but her determination burned brighter than ever. Marcus stayed by her side, guilt gnawing at him for not stopping Lila when he had the chance. Together, they pieced together what little they knew about the gemstone and its connection to Blackthorn Hollow. "It's no ordinary treasure," Evelyn said one evening as she sat propped up against a tree, her wound still tender. "That stone, it felt alive, like it was watching me." Marcus nodded grimly. Lila didn't seem surprised by the Guardian or the runes. She knew more than she let on. "And now she has the gemstone," Evelyn added, her voice tight with frustration. "We can't let her keep it. Whatever power it holds, it's dangerous in the wrong hands." But tracking Lila wouldn't be easy. The woman had vanished into the wilderness like smoke, leaving behind only faint traces of her passage. Still, Evelyn refused to give up. With Marcus's help, she began retracing their steps through Blackthorn Hollow, searching for clues that might lead them to Lila, or at least explain why the gemstone was so coveted. Days turned into weeks as they scoured the forest. Along the way, they encountered remnants of other expeditions, abandoned campsites, rusted tools, and even more bodies. Each corpse bore the same precise, almost surgical wounds, marks of the Guardian's wrath. One night, while camping near an old oak tree, Evelyn woke abruptly to the sound of whispering. At first, she thought it was the wind, but the voices grew clearer, more insistent. They seemed to emanate from the shadows themselves. "Do you hear that?" she asked Marcus, who was keeping watch. He shook his head, frowning. "Hear what?" Before Evelyn could respond, the ground beneath them trembled violently. Roots erupted from the soil, writhing like serpents, and the air filled with the stench of decay. From the darkness emerged a figure, not the Guardian this time, but something far worse. It was humanoid, yet grotesquely distorted, its limbs elongated and covered in bark-like skin. Its face was featureless, save for a gaping maw filled with jagged teeth. The creature let out a guttural roar, charging toward them with unnatural speed. "Run!" Evelyn shouted, grabbing her machete. They barely escaped, fleeing deeper into the forest as the creature pursued them relentlessly. It wasn't until they stumbled upon an ancient ruin, a crumbling stone structure half buried in moss, that they managed to lose it. Panting and exhausted, they ducked inside, barricading the entrance with fallen debris. "What the hell was that thing?" Marcus panted, clutching his chest. "I don't know," Evelyn admitted, her mind racing, "but I think it's connected to the gemstone. Something about that place. It's corrupting everything." As dawn broke, they explored the ruins, hoping to find answers. In the center of the structure stood a pedestal, much like the one that had held the gemstone. Carved into its surface were symbols identical to those on the altar, and written in faded ink below them was a warning. "Beware the heart of Blackthorn. Its light brings madness. Its shadow consumes all." Evelyn's blood ran cold. The gemstone isn't just a treasure, she realized aloud. It's the heart of Blackthorn, the source of the Hollow's curse. Marcus frowned. "So what happens if someone uses it?" "They destroy everything," Evelyn said grimly. "Or worse, they become part of it." Their discovery gave them new urgency. If Lila used the gemstone, the consequences would be catastrophic. They needed to find her before it was too late. Tracking Lila proved harder than anticipated. She moved like a ghost, covering her tracks meticulously. But eventually they found her, at the edge of a massive sinkhole deep within the hollow. The ground around it was scorched black, and the air shimmered with heat, as though the earth itself were alive. Lila stood at the center of the chaos, holding the gemstone aloft. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and her voice echoed unnaturally as she chanted words neither Evelyn nor Marcus could understand. "You're too late," Lila screamed, turning to face them. Her once human features were twisted, her body beginning to merge with the corrupted energy of the hollow. "The power is mine." "No!" Evelyn lunged forward, tackling Lila to the ground. The gemstone slipped from her grasp, rolling toward the edge of the sinkhole. For a moment, everything froze. Then the ground cracked open, revealing a swirling vortex of darkness below. The Guardian appeared once more, its form shifting wildly as it reached for the gemstone. "Stop it!" Lila shrieked, clawing at Evelyn. But Evelyn shoved her aside, grabbing the gemstone just as the Guardian lunged. Time seemed to slow. Evelyn locked eyes with the creature, seeing not malice but sorrow in its gaze. Without hesitation, she hurled the gemstone into the vortex. A deafening roar shook the hollow as the vortex collapsed, dragging the Guardian and Lila into oblivion. When the dust settled, the hollow was silent. The oppressive weight that had hung over the forest lifted, replaced by an eerie calm. Evelyn and Marcus limped away from Blackthorn Hollow, battered. Though they had survived, neither felt victorious. The cost had been too high, the lives lost, the horrors witnessed. As they emerged from the forest, Evelyn glanced back one last time. Somewhere deep within those trees, the hollow waited, its secrets buried once more. And though the gemstone was gone, she couldn't shake the feeling that Blackthorn wasn't truly done with them. Not yet. Please hit the like and subscribe. The Echoes of Blackthorn. Weeks passed after their harrowing escape from Blackthorn Hollow. Evelyn and Marcus returned to civilization, their bodies healing but their minds scarred by what they had endured. They tried to move on, burying themselves in mundane tasks, repairing gear, studying maps, anything to keep the memories at bay. But no matter how hard they tried, the hollow lingered in their thoughts like a shadow that refused to fade. Evelyn found herself drawn to research, poring over ancient texts and folklore about cursed artifacts and forgotten places. She couldn't shake the feeling that destroying the heart of Blackthorn hadn't been the end. It was merely a pause. The gemstone's power had seeped into the land itself, twisting it into something unnatural. And though the Guardian was gone, the hollow still whispered. Marcus, meanwhile, struggled with guilt. He replayed Lila's betrayal in his mind, questioning whether he could have done more to stop her. His nights were plagued by nightmares of the creature they'd encountered in the ruins, its featureless face haunting him even in waking hours. He began drinking heavily, retreating further into himself as the days dragged on. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows of their small cabin, Evelyn sat hunched over a dusty tome. Her finger traced a passage that sent a chill down her spine. When the heart is sundered, its fragments will seek new vessels. Wherever they fall, corruption follows. She slammed the book shut, her heart pounding. "Marcus," she called out, her voice sharp with urgency, "we need to go back." Marcus looked up from the corner where he'd been nursing a bottle of whiskey. "Back? To Blackthorn? Are you insane?" "It's not over," Evelyn insisted, tossing the book onto the table. "The gemstone shattered when I threw it into the vortex. Its pieces are still out there, spreading the curse. If we don't find them, this won't just stay in the hollow, it'll spread everywhere." Marcus stared at her, torn between disbelief and dread. Finally, he sighed, setting the bottle aside. "You're right. We can't ignore it. But if we go back, we're walking straight into hell." Their return to Blackthorn Hollow was quieter this time, the forest eerily subdued. Gone were the glowing runes and shifting shadows. Instead, an oppressive stillness hung in the air, as though the land itself were holding its breath. Even the wildlife seemed absent, leaving only silence behind. They followed faint traces of corruption, patches of blackened earth, trees with twisted bark, and streams tainted with ash-colored water. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the hollow resisted their presence. By the third day, they reached the sinkhole, where Evelyn had destroyed the gemstone. It was larger now, its edges crumbling and jagged, exuding a faint hum that vibrated in their bones. "This is where it started," Evelyn murmured, kneeling at the edge. She pulled out a compass which spun wildly before settling on a direction. "And this is where it leads." Following the compass, they ventured deeper into the hollow until they came upon a clearing littered with shards of crystal-like material. Each fragment pulsed faintly with the same otherworldly glow as the original gemstone. As Evelyn reached for one, Marcus grabbed her arm. "Careful," he warned. "If these things are part of the heart, touching them might be dangerous." Evelyn hesitated but nodded. Using gloves, she carefully collected the fragments into a lead-lined box, sealing them away. With each piece secured, the oppressive atmosphere around them lessened slightly, as though the hollow were exhaling a long-held breath. But their relief was short-lived. As they prepared to leave, the ground trembled violently, and a low growl echoed through the trees. From the shadows emerged not one, but multiple guardians, or rather twisted echoes of the original. Their forms flickered like mirages, their glowing eyes fixed on the box in Evelyn's hands. "They want the fragments," Marcus said, drawing his knife. "Destroying the heart didn't kill them, it just made them weaker." "And now they're trying to reclaim their power," Evelyn finished grimly. "We need to get out of here, now." The journey back became a desperate race against time. The Guardians pursued them relentlessly, their numbers growing with every passing moment. Trees collapsed in their path, forcing detours, and the very ground seemed to shift beneath their feet. Exhaustion weighed heavily on both Evelyn and Marcus, but they pressed on, driven by sheer willpower. Finally, they reached the edge of the hollow. Just as the Guardians closed in, Evelyn hurled the box containing the fragments into a roaring bonfire they'd prepared earlier. Flames engulfed the shards, sending plumes of dark smoke spiraling into the sky. One by one, the Guardians let out ear-splitting shrieks before dissolving into nothingness. When the fire died down, all that remained was ash. The hollow fell silent once more, its malevolent energy seemingly extinguished. Months later, Evelyn and Marcus stood on a hill overlooking the forest. The trees were green again, the air fresh and clean. Blackthorn Hollow had healed, or so it seemed. "You think it's really over?" Marcus asked, breaking the silence. Evelyn shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe. For now." As they turned to leave, a single crow cawed overhead, circling lazily before vanishing into the canopy. Evelyn paused, staring after it. Something about the bird unsettled her, though she couldn't say why. Perhaps Blackthorn Hollow would always hold secrets best left buried. But for now, they had survived, and that was enough. Together, they walked away, leaving the forest behind. Please hit the like button and subscribe.